The FIFA Ethics Committee has banned 6 African officials, issues around corruption, maladministration. You've been quite vocal about this issue. Why?
It is because I think as much as people can do all these things, I mean, we must be very clear and pronounce our stand with regard to maladministration and corruption whenever it manifests itself. And what has been the stance that was taken by FIFA with regard to suspending and expelling people, it means that we have to be decisive against acts of maladministration and corruption the world over. So we're encouraged by such acts.
Other issues also to rear their ugly head recently have been doping scandals and across sporting codes, in rugby, in cricket, and even in Nigerian athletics. You've added your voice to that one.
Yes, we have added our voice. In fact, we're signatory to WADA, and we have won the WADA bid 2013 here in South Africa, to be hosted by Johannesburg. And South Africa have been a major role player with regard to anti-doping agency in the whole world. And we are signatories to various conventions with regard to anti-doping. But over and above that, the question of doping, it's an act of cheaters. Yeah. But also there is equally a dimension to this particular point, particularly with regard to the rugby scandal, is where in which people have taken substances, but at the same time, not going all out of their way to basically practice doping, as in what people have actually characterized. But we're very clear from the point of our government that we are active participants in terms of different conventions that have been signed, and will campaign strongly for acts of cheaters in the sport overall.
Now, some of these issues really set the tone of what are key issues that you have to address in your tenure now as sports minister. We've seen recent elections in South African football, and historically, these elections are mired in factionalism and infighting. FIFA then added its voice as to whether or not football officials should be given bonuses this year, etc. It takes us to the core issue of governance and some of the problems we've experienced concerning accountability in South African football. How are you going to deal with that? Not
only football, sport in general. You see that you've got small federations, because South Africa, we think that sport is rugby, cricket, and soccer, and it ends there. And you've got problems probably overall, but you also have got good federations who have outdone themselves, and good corporate governance practices and so on. Our task is that we've got to assist, particularly with public entities. As I'm speaking to you now, we met with the Boxing SA. We are rolling up our sleeves. We're addressing issues of corporate governance with regard to CFOs, with regard to acting CEOs. People have been engaged, throttling one another with regard to the question of administration of these bodies. We're getting in there, partnering with them, assist them, and basically have good, sound cooperative governance so that we can attract investor and corporate South Africa to invest in sport. So these are some of the things that we've got to basically address. Some of the things at the heart of everything else is the total exposure of people in terms of resources, money packages that are huge, that have been injected in sport. And this money, in most instances, in some of the sporting code, have not gone to where it is destined to. So that's why, with regard to FIFA, we have established the Legacy Trust, and we're proud of that. And that we have said FIFA will participate, government will participate, SAFA will participate as a leading body to ensure that this money does not line up pockets of people and buy salaries for PAs and everything else, but I mean, it goes to
many people would argue we've heard it all before. Many ministers come chest puffed out, confident they're going to root out corruption and maladministration in the sport. But in the end, you get caught up in the quagmire, it seems, because the root causes are not being identified. In your view, what are the problems? You said that it's not just in soccer, it's across the sporting codes. Athletics, we know of all these salacious details that came through.
It's money. And the fact that how people manage money on behalf of the federations and huge resource packages and all of that. So you've got to get sound people. And you see, training does not only have to go to athletes, it must also go to sport administration. Vets Business School, the other day I attended a course on sports administration, where in which there were graduates out of that, soccer and everything else. And so such courses and are very much important for sports administrators, because it's not just managing this thing from the boot of your car, even in the business sense, you know, of this thing called administration of sport. If you have to talk business sense with regard to sport, you've got to ask yourself a question. If we are advancing, which somebody has raised this question with me, why big soccer clubs like Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates are not listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange? And what is the participation of those who support this sport? Over 10 million people. What is their participation in terms of holding interest in these particular clubs from a point of view of a business sense and expansion with regard to sport? So I think there's a whole lot of things that have got to be looked at with regard to the development of sport in South Africa.
I think Fikile Mbalula wants to add to that, the corporatization of sport, professionalizing it. I mean, we've got big clubs here that are pan-African and yet owned by local South Africans or local Africans, as it were. But we're battling to get them to the caliber of the Man Uniteds purely because of those professional elements.
Well, I think people have, you know, it's an asset.
Maybe I shouldn't have used the example of Man United. I take that back.
We won.
It's an asset that's been developed over years that people have been very much attached to. So one can understand, because it's also about development. I think you're going to see in the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to see one of the ways of exiting, of crystallizing, particularly if you're talking about the owners of Pirates or owners of Chiefs. If they want to crystallize some capital for themselves to do other things, it's go to the stock exchange and list. So I think it's early days, and it's good that does not happen, because we need first to really strengthen governance and make sure that, Minister, all the good things that we're talking about are embedded across society, and then thereafter we can take them to public listings so that, you know, those when they become real companies, they can do the good things that we want, because they'll be symbols of our country.
Moving beyond those issues is the very sensitive and emotive issue of transformation, and it seems as though your predecessors have found themselves overwhelmed by this particular issue. Do you think that a new South Africa is reflected in our national teams across sporting codes?
No, not at all. I think the point is that our predecessors did something about transformation, and they made their mark, and they produced quotas as a way of enforcing that the teams are reflective and that talent is not enforced. Our task is to be innovative, come with a new, fresh perspective that takes the question, because truly speaking, the question of the quotas has actually been used in a manner that they are counterproductive with regard to development and merit. In fact, quotas are suffocating talent, and black players and African players in sporting teams, other sporting teams, are referred to as quota players. But the thing is that the quotas say that on the day of play, only 3 players will participate, irrespective of the fact that you can have 5 to 10 African players of color who are capable. They won't be filled, because if you use the book of those quotas, it's counterproductive, and therefore it means only 3 on the day can be filled. So we are getting into full swing in the new year with regard to looking at the charter that was adopted, but at the same time issues of equity with regard to transformation in sport. And it's not just a question of race, but it's a question of saying that how do we make it a point that sport in general in South Africa is reflective of the demographics of our
One way of doing that is to introduce development programs at primary school level, and everybody's calling for this. Is that one of the reasons why you keep on having these racial polarities is because children of the middle class who go to private schools, which are predominantly white schools, get the very best in coaching, training, support in sports and extramural activities, which doesn't have in traditionally disadvantaged schools, and you need to level that playing field. To
be honest with you, is that we've bogged ourselves down into a territorial battle in the departments of government. Basic education, formerly Department of Education in South Africa, and the sports, as to who's supposed to drive school sport in our country. And school sport has died. If it is there, it's parochial, you know. It is successful in other areas and others it's not. So I think our task is not to pay lip service. We are going to implement, both in terms of policy blueprint, but at the same time, implementation of school sport overall in South Africa, get it going and done with finish and clear next year.
Can we overcome the legacy of apartheid by next year, you say?
Yes, next year we're rolling up and we'll get going, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a bigger issue, Lerato, which doesn't rest to the minister. The issue, I think, where we failed in the past 17 years is also keeping the special of nature of apartheid intact. Because in a number of empty spaces in Johannesburg, where we could have brought in middle-income houses, low-middle-income houses, we've basically built in supermarkets and malls in those places, where in fact we shouldn't have built houses for low-middle income, because many societies are integrated. This country continues to be racially, now it's class biased, because if you are doing very well, generally speaking, in the township, you tend to move to the suburbs, and you're reinforcing rails operating patterns. So I think part of that, we need to make sure that where there's empty spaces, we reintegrate low to middle income people, so that in that development of sports and any other things that talks to one nation, there's integration, not only in sport, but across our society.
Minister, you refer to the fact that we're beginning to see corporate sponsors pull out, and you were referring there to the governance issues, and I think in athletics that's played itself out. But we've seen a major bank, in fact major banks, withdrawing from cycling, withdrawing from football recently, and this raises the question of a need for new funding models for sports, so that we really fast-track development, but we make it an interesting investment area, like you referred to earlier.
Of course, but as much as there's been withdrawal, but at the same time there's been a reservoir of goodwill. I mean, just the other day, First National Bank invested over 18 million into soccer development academies, led by Lucas Radebe and Boyalo in South Africa, and we launched that in FNP. Of course, people have got their own reasons of withdrawal, I mean, cutting costs and all of that. But I think we need to have a decent conversation with corporate South Africa to seek to say that use social investment and basically focus on sport and sports development, because if you do that, you are fighting crime, you are unifying the nation, you are addressing social cohesion. So that's what we want. So we're going to have that also with everyone else in corporate South Africa.
Go ahead.
One of the issues, Minister, that you avoided in the derby between Pirates and Chiefs, you took a stance that, you know, any of the teams could win. Can you share with CNBC viewers which one, Pirates or Chiefs?
No, you know.
Careful what you say.
You know, I'm a fan of Bafana Bafana and Banyana, you know, netball, Bantwana, Amachimbos. So I'm a Pogo and all of that. So those are the people I support. So I don't want to.
Is there any reason you're wearing a black and white suit today?
No. I don't want to divide the nation, you know, and kill the mood and the spirit of football. Others accuse me because of my association with Bobby Mtaun that I favor Kaizer Chiefs. I don't know. I mean, I'm who I am, and it's my secret. I keep it at home.
And a final and a very brief question. South Africa did well in hosting the World Cup. Nobody can dispute that. Durban is now bidding for the Olympics, and we're told that South Africa is also bidding for AFCON 2015. There is a sense that we're overly ambitious. We should step back a little bit, focus on development priorities in South Africa, not get too excited about wanting to host every single sporting event, especially AFCON. Leave it to other African countries to shine a little bit.
Well, you know, this thing of hosting is no longer a question that South Africa is overzealous, we want to host everything. We have been persuaded to host. So we've got to prioritize. Part of the issues before cabinet, which we are supposed to prioritize, which we are supposed to present as a ministry, is to say which events, mega events, South Africa will be prepared and interested to host. With regard to the Olympics, many people quite silently and quietly have shown interest that South Africa must bid. And in this process, we are shortlisting the cities that are interested. Durban has already led as if it has been accorded the status as a bidding. There's nothing wrong about that, but there are still other cities who are, so SASCOC is in a process to finalize that. Once it's finalized, we bring it before cabinet. Right. Before July 123 session of IOC in Durban, we should have finalized and made our intentions very clear to IOC for the bidding in 2020. Well, SAFA, we are also going to be meeting with them about 2015. You might find that there's other interest there and all of that. They will brief us fully about it with regard to 2015 and the hosting of AFCON. So We are ready for these events because we've got the infrastructure. The stadiums are big. They must not become wild elephants. Let's get them. Let's get the sport and soccer rolling in those particular stadiums, and this is what is important for us.